Hello there, everybody. Welcome to the kitchen. We're armed and dangerous here. Anyways, today we're going to make some cornbread in the cast iron skillet, and we're going to talk a little history here as well. So, cornbread, kind of an old school dish. Good for the backwoodsman, especially if you make it in a cast iron skillet. So I have that warming up a little bit over here. And I got a sack of cornmeal here that I've had in the refrigerator for a few months, actually. In the refrigerator because this is good old-fashioned cornmeal. Are we focusing here? I need to clean that. This is from the Burwell Morgan Mill in Clark County, Virginia. Millwood, Virginia town, specifically. The mill, actually it says right there, has been stone ground product since 1785. Right there in that building. The mill was founded by a guy named Daniel Morgan and somebody named Burwell. Now, Burwell, probably never heard that name before, but you may have heard Daniel Morgan. So, let's talk a little bit about Daniel Morgan while we make some cornbread. Let's see here. Going to, we got this butter here. We're going to put 8 tablespoons of butter into the cast iron pan. Eight tablespoons is half of this here stick that I got at Aldi. Some nice, healthy, grass-fed butter. It's already soft for the most part because I had it sitting out. And we're just going to let that melt in our skillet. That's right here on the stove on low. And we'll just get some of that other that's stuck in the wrapper there. Let's see. Anything in here? Yeah, make sure we get all that buttery goodness in. And I know I'm not really in the frame, but hopefully you can see me. Or not really see me, I know you can see my torso here, but I hope you can hear me. So Daniel Morgan made his way to Virginia when he was a teenager, older teenager, young man if you will, and settled in the area that's near what today is the city of Winchester in Virginia. So Winchester at the time was a frontier town. It's a nice, little small city today, decent sized, but still be considered a small city. He lived outside of there and hung out around the town that is today Berryville, Virginia, which really isn't far outside of Winchester, and neither is that Millwood where this mill stands today, home of the Clark County Historical Society. So Daniel Morgan spent his days as a young man there, early 20s, and really kind of made a reputation for himself as a bit of a brawler when he was a young man. We need a cup of cornmeal and a cup of flour. Self-rising flour here to be exact. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Oh well. And we're going to get a couple of eggs. Daniel Morgan eventually joined up with General Braddock's crew to make their way up to Pennsylvania to invade Fort Duquesne. And if you know your history of the French and Indian War, you will know that General Braddock's invasion there was a disaster. General Braddock was killed and buried in the road on the way home. Now, it is said that Daniel Morgan was a wagon driver, and he drove over the road where they buried General Braddock so that the Indians couldn't dig him up and take his scalp and mutilate him and all that stuff. All right, oven sun preheat. We got to get moving here. Now, Daniel Morgan, during his time in the military in the French and Indian War, also since he was a brawler, you know, he had maybe some military discipline issues. And he ended up getting flogged terribly by his commanding officers for some reason that I don't recall off the top of my head, but that flogging, the memory of that stuck with him for years to come. We're putting in a cup and a half of milk. Technically, you're kind of supposed to use buttermilk, but I'm sure this will. Regular old milk here will suffice. Set that to the side. Then Daniel kind of made his way now as a miller and businessman in Northern Virginia there outside of Winchester until the Revolutionary War broke out. Daniel Morgan raised, what was I looking for here? I was going to put in a pinch of salt. Daniel Morgan raised a rifle regiment eventually and made his way up to Massachusetts. This would have been after the Battle of Bunker Hill, when the Continental Army was kind of hanging out there outside of Boston still. But Daniel Morgan made a name for himself as the war went on as a natural leader. 3 tablespoons of honey this calls for. It's kind of a lot. Anyway, I'm sure it'll taste nice and sweet and good. And I like honey. This is some nice local honey. Raw Virginia honey. And I'm just kind of gonna mix this all together with a spoon here. So Daniel Morgan was all over the place during the Revolutionary War. He was at the Battle of Quebec, which turned out to be a bit of a disaster there for the Continental Army. It was tough going getting there, and an attack during the city. Daniel Morgan was captured and was a prisoner of war for a while. As time went on throughout the war, Daniel Morgan's riflemen were a big part of the Continental Army's victory at the Battle of Saratoga, which in our history books we learned as kids, you may know, was kind of the turning point of the Revolutionary War, and that was in summer or fall of 1777. I forget exactly when, but Morgan, as well as Benedict Arnold, played a huge role in the victory at Saratoga, and we can even give a little bit of credit to General Horatio Gates, who was the overall commander there at Saratoga. It was not George Washington. He was elsewhere. Now, if you have seen the movie, The Patriot, there is some sort of very loose base info there. With Mel Gibson's character with Daniel Morgan. It's mostly based off of Francis Marion and another fellow from down there in South Carolina as well. But Daniel Morgan was the principal commander at the Battle of Cowpens in the Carolinas there. And he was a pretty big victory down there, even though it is, if you look at the numbers of troops, it's a pretty small scale battle by most standards, but it was a pretty significant victory in the Southern theater during the war, and Daniel Morgan was a huge part of that and really made him a legend, at least in his day. We may not learn as much about Daniel Morgan in our lives today, but he is, to me, an important figure in American history that should not go unrecognized for the sacrifices that he made during the Revolution. And he lived, I think, till 1802 or so, somewhere around there. Not super long after the war, but he was there in the foundings of America. I believe he served in Congress for a stint as a representative for Virginia. And I took a visit to his grave and a couple of monuments to him in the city of Winchester this past summer. There is a video out there on that. Maybe look up my name and Daniel Morgan and it'll come up. But cornbread, got chili over there in slow cooker. We're gonna have a nice meal tonight at the Isaac New Backwoodsman house. So cornbread, 1.5 cups milk, a cup cornmeal, 2 eggs, 3 tablespoons honey, half teaspoon of salt, 1 cup flour, self-rising. If you don't have self-rising, use some baking powder. 400 degrees in the oven for 25 minutes. Let's give it a go. Let's get a peek here. Ooh, yeah, look at that. Here is the finished product. I think the recipe called for a bit too much butter, but let's see. There is our cornbread, blue corn, traditional. So, bon appetit. Pretty good. Maybe a little too crispy on the top, but still tastes good. And it's gonna go over here, right into this chili in my bowl.